Heads by Higashino Keigo and Masamoto has become one of my favorite mangas of all time. It's a psychological mystery that follows a patient who received a brain transplant and uh, slowly begins changing from who he was into um, the person who the person whose brain was put into him, pretty much. It's a really cool and really well done story. It's not too long; it's only about 36 chapters, but I fell in love with this and pretty much read from start to finish the whole thing in about one sitting. Um, and I just kind of wanted to talk about it just because I really haven't seen a whole lot of stuff about this one. Um, but it is really, really cool. So it kind of opens up as your typical introduction. You meet Junichi Naruse. He's like your average shy um, worker. He works at this like an electronic repair company, um, and he's kind of a suck up. He doesn't want to cause too much trouble. He does as he's told. Even if he doesn't like doing it, he just does it regardless. He just doesn't want to cause any trouble. Seems to kind of have some a little bit of PTSD from bullying when he was younger, and he ends up falling in love with this girl who works at an art supply shop. They end up going out a few times, form a relationship, and eventually decide that they're going to move in together. And it's during this whole process as he's at a real estate office trying to find a new place for him and his girlfriend that a freak accident happens when a gunman comes in um, and begins robbing the place. Um, During the robbery, he notices that a child is attempting to flee through a window, and the robber notices this and turns the gun and seems to have intentions of shooting the child. And in a very out of character moment, Junichi runs and jumps into the line of fire and ends up getting shot in the head. This puts him into a vegetable state. He ends up comatose. And it isn't until doctors find a donor whose brain perfectly matches his, and they successfully complete the first brain transplant. And after Junichi wakes up, he remembers his name. He remembers um, who he was, like his life before the accident. Um, and all the signs seem to be saying that he's going to be able to recover. And slowly, Junichi begins to have these moments that are very out of character for him. It starts with craving canned coffee, which he's never really liked before. And in doing this, he goes out and he discovers the two brains, pretty much his like the piece of his brain that was blown off, and the remaining piece of his donor's brain. Um, and from this, he questions the doctors, and they eventually tell him kind of what happened in the operation. And from this, he tries to learn about who his donor was, and is immediately shut down by the doctors, which is obviously kind of a bit of a red flag. Um, but obviously, this doesn't stop his curiosity. So throughout the story, he begins to want to learn more about uh, who his donor was, try to discover who he was. Um, and during, I guess, this whole time, he begins to show more and more traits of someone who isn't him. He begins to be more of a hateful person. He One of the biggest examples is that his girlfriend Megumi has like one of her main traits and like a character features that she has freckles on her face that she was bullied for, that Junichi expressed, I guess, a fondness over, that he really liked them. He thought they were cute. Um, and it is until one night when he just has a thought of, if only she didn't have those freckles. And it starts from that, and he begins to kind of unwind and go more or less insane. I guess he ends up meeting like the parent of his donor, and the parent kind of tells him how much of a troubled child he was, how violent he was growing up, and more or less how much of a nuisance and problem that he was. And from this, Junichi begins to believe that this other piece, or I guess that this piece in his head that isn't his brain, this other person's brain is slowly, his personality is slowly taking over Junichi's own personality. And after a bit more um, searching and digging, um, he finds that it in fact is not like the person who um, the the man who he met who he assumed was the father of the donor in fact wasn't, and he was being paid off by the hospital to kind of feed him these lies. um, and through discovering that, Junichi meets the real father of his supposed donor and learns that he's in fact the exact opposite of what he's been told. He was a kind kid, never got into trouble, super nice, and pretty much the exact opposite of the person he was described, and the exact opposite of the personality that he's feeling. So this leads him to believe that instead of like a personality happening, it's the side effects of either like the medicine he's on or like side effects from the actual operation itself, and it's just like the recovery process, um, and of this all like happening. And throughout the story, he begins to show and lean more into the violent personality, by criticizing the work ethic at his job. Um, he begins to kind of pitch ideas for how the company itself can be more productive, and kind of more or less insults his bosses and their irresponsibility in handling all the employees and how they work, which causes a big rift between him and his employer. He ends up getting into a fight with one of his coworkers that almost leads to his coworker's death. He has to be like pulled off them by those around him. And I guess to backtrack a little bit, we end up learning a bit more about the robber of the real estate agency, um, the one who ended up shooting Junichi to begin with. His name was Shusuke, and we learned that Shunsuke was the illegitimate son of the owner of the company, and that this guy, or I guess the owner, more or less, like, I don't think disown's the right word, but he never reached out, never gave them any help, even in the time when their mother got super sick and was dying. He never gave any help. He never attended the funeral or anything like that. And this resentment turned into rage, and that's why he attacked that real estate office to begin with. He ended up grabbing a bag of the money and throwing it out into the street, giving it out all to the public, and then taking his own life on top of the building. And as more time passes, Junichi's design itself changes. It becomes more rough, more edgy, and he, after learning that the police lied to him, or police, after learning that the doctors withheld information from him, that the man who he originally thought was the father of his donor was lying about it and was paid off by the hospital itself. Um, and as he begins to lose interest in his the partner that he believed that he loved, um, he ends up going to a bar to try to drink his sorrows away, and he notices the piano and begins to kind of tune out everything else around, and he's never noticed it before, and he begins to appreciate everything that there is about the melody of this piano. And um, even when someone begins talking over and gets loud, um, like whenever they begin talking over the piano and he can't, like, he gets distracted from it, he resorts to violence and beats the man up almost to death, hitting him in the head over the bottle. Almost lights this dude on fire. Um, and at one point, he's invited out to um, to have dinner with the family of the little girl who he took the bullet for during the robbery. And it's there that he again kind of has this moment when she's playing piano. He begins to he's noticing the piano more, even calls out like a note that's out of tune that no one really caught. During the car ride back after the dinner that they have with the child and her family, he ends up learning that Shunsuke, the man who originally shot him, the man who was robbing the real estate office, also wanted to be a musician and was very musically talented. And this kind of plants an idea that, and kind of starts connecting the dots that maybe the donor whose brain is now in his mind is actually the brain of the man who shot him. From this idea, he goes and he finds Shunsuke's sister. He talks to his sister, um, and he has like almost a familiarity and feels close to her, even though he's never met her before. And this begins to feed more into that idea that the brain that was given to him is the brain of the man who shot him originally. He kind of begins to lean even more, and the personality of Shunsuke starts taking over more and more. And throughout all of this stuff happening, he was instructed by his doctors to keep a diary of how he's feeling, so they can note any changes of personality if something ends up happening, which clearly something is happening. The One of the doctors who he was with, or I guess who he's taking a romantic interest in, begins coming over more often. They begin sleeping with each other, and he begins to, after she asks him more and more about the diary, he begins to kind of have um, doubts and suspicions that she might just be there for the diary itself, and that she's been lying to him the entire time, that she isn't on his side. And again, after confirming his suspicions by going through her things and finding the floppy disks of his diary, he snaps and he chokes her to death, killing her. And after realizing that he only really has a matter of time before either the police catch him or his brain is fully taken over by Shunsuke's brain slice, he decides that he needs to reconnect and he needs to rediscover that side of himself once again before it all ends. And after meeting with and reconnecting with his old girlfriend, he is able to once again paint in the way he was able to before the incident happened. And he's completed his side of his mission, and he now decides to finish Shunsuke's part, which is the revenge on his father, who more or less caused this entire situation to happen. He returns to the real estate site. He takes Shunsuke's father hostage, and during that, he discovers the all the cash and gold that he's been keeping secret and from all the taxes that he's more or less been evading. And after taking his father hostage and making him admit to everything he's done, um, once again, Junichi more or less completes the cycle with a gun to his head. But he realized that he doesn't want, and in his own words, he says, "I don't want yet another brain transplant, do I?" And in one of the most raw images, he puts two guns up to his head, firing both, and ultimately killing himself. And in a really pretty moment at the very end, we see Megumi, his girlfriend, or I guess Junichi's girlfriend, with Shunsuke's sister, as they happen to meet and connect. And it ends like with a really pretty silhouette of both Junichi and Shunsuke kind of there in spirit with them. Um, yeah, man. All in all, it's a fantastic manga that probably this video didn't really do justice, but if it interests you in any way, shape, or form, I highly, highly recommend checking it out. It is, again, a very quick read and one of the best mangas that I have personally read in a minute. So, yeah, again, go read it. It's amazing.